Today we have two executives sharing their thoughts with us, Joyce of Orange and Åsa Tamsons from Ericsson. So we hope to get a good perspective both from the operators as well as from the equipment vendors. How is the network actually performing and adapting to these changes? So let's kick it off. Paul, how has your company, as one of the major network operators in Europe, been adapting to this new work from home, work from anywhere environment?
Thanks, Jim. Hi, Åsa. This has been a major challenge, of course, unforeseen. We have business critical programs, so to react to all kinds of disasters, geographical, technical, political, but nothing at this scale worldwide, a pandemic simultaneously. So first of all, we had to mobilize our workforce of about 150,000 people in more than 180 countries. Of course, concentration centers in different areas. So the first thing was the continuity of service for all of our customers. And that requires both people coming to access remotely all of the services, but also intervention, field intervention. We did not stop telling field technicians to intervene, to maintain, to repair, to install for critical services, both for ourselves, but also for our customers, wherever we were. I think some of the biggest challenges are quite often the actual basic equipment on PCs. Do we have enough PCs? And of course, the working environment for our staff. We have to bear in mind that some of our staff are working in houses where there could be 2 or 3 generations. So equipping them, helping them to work into that environment. And the last point I would say was the dramatic and continuous flow in data flows. We saw new data flows. We saw multiples of 5 to 15. We saw mobile networks being saturated. And we saw as well a lot of increases in usage of all of our infrastructure around the world. So I think it's being prepared for this, having standardized processes, having global capabilities and standardized tools, and a great workforce who really stepped up to the challenge and moved forward.
Great. Also, I'd like to welcome you to the conversation as well. And from your perspective and from Ericsson's perspective as a global organization, how have you adapted to this pandemic?
Hi, Jim, and great to see you again, Paul. I think if you look at Ericsson, we're just like Orange. We're a company present in more than 180 countries, around 100,000 people, and we're in the midst of supporting our customers with the 5G rollouts around the world. And I think there's this shift of all of us having to work from home has emphasized the importance of digital infrastructure and connectivity, as Paul pointed out. But I think it also interestingly has shown how quickly we can adapt and change. And I think it shows also it's not the technology that typically is the limiting factor. It's actually how quickly are we willing to try to something new and accept and use it and change our way of working. And here I has found it extremely impressive how 85,000 are our staff overnight and within 48 hours we're working from home. And if you put that in context, we're having a big part of our team in the services side. Some they're out in the field in supporting Orange and other companies in upgrading capacity. What we call the network here is to continue to roll out 5G and build up that capacity. And we're prioritized for them to be safely in the office and in the field. But we also have a lot of things run remotely. For instance, we run the networks on behalf of several customers around the world, and in total 1 billion subscribers, 1 billion mobile subscribers around the world. We continue to keep that up and running throughout the pandemic. And then I think there are simple things, just like Paul mentioned, availability of laptops. We had one of these, classic internal transformation projects where we're upgrading our IT environment, and typically these projects go on for some time and take time, but we were forced to make that full shift to Teams, which we were in the midst of basically in a number of days and weeks and increase the capacity, but also got everyone to change to the new tool. I think just a great example of how, at the daily working model actually adapt and do things that otherwise would have taken times and incentives for people to try to something new.
Yeah, it seems like a miracle that it does all work and that it has been coming together for the most part. Paul, you mentioned planning. And of course, planning for disasters would be of paramount importance at a network operator, but planning for a pandemic is something different. It's not just your company or your biggest customer that has the emergency. It's all of society that has the emergency.
Absolutely. And, that's the hardest part, I would say, is because we have to manage, first and foremost, the safety of our people and the continuity of their access to the applications. And the second of all is the customers and the infrastructure. We multiplied our transatlantic capacity by 3 to 4-fold. Please bear in mind that on average, 75% of the traffic from any European user goes across the Atlantic to a destination point in North America. So, and we also had a simultaneous launching of Disney Channel, which was happening at the same time as the pandemic. So we had to kind of deal with that as well, because that was going to be more and more used by people at home. Now, customer-wise, I give you many examples, but probably 2 or 3 spring to mind. One is a global PC printer manufacturer who had 10,000 agents in their contact center and were selling a lot of infrastructure for the reasons we just said. So they absolutely needed continuity of service. So moving from 35 contact centers in different countries around the world to working from home in a quite complex business model, that was achieved overnight by the support of our teams with, of course, the customer teams. Clinics, National Health Service in the UK, hospitals in France, you had to set up immediately remote secure access for hospitals, for doctors, for sharing information amongst hospitals, for increasing the incoming call centers to deal with all of the calls, up to and including now we're actually correlating the data on the calls relative to the propagation of the pandemic. And in many cases, we had to provide the same support to our customers to remotely connect their users through cloud-based platforms. 5,000 users in North America, 5,000 here in Europe. But probably, I think it was the simultaneity of all of those requests which required agility and the adoption of the tools and the adoptions. And even now, we're saying to ourselves, some of the good practices we did during this period, we have to retain them because we were able to do things so much faster than we normally do when we go through our standard processes.
Yeah, I think if anything, the pandemic has shown the importance of digital infrastructure, and we were in the midst of the 5G rollout. That has continued. It's hard to tell if that has gone faster. It's not gone slower. But I think what is really impressive is what I call still the network heroes, and make sure that we continue to light up the 5G networks. But because if that anything that this pandemic has shown, it's needed. And it's not because 5G, we'd like to talk about it and it's a hype, etc. I think it's more, we've seen the big benefits. The question is how quickly will the adoptions of those capabilities be? And I think it's very clear through this pandemic that wireless, hence flexible, reliable, and secure connectivity, it's a requirement. It's increasingly so. I think one is now we move quite quickly overnight to work, to bring our work environment to home. But do we all have secure connectivity into our homes? Is that cloud environment fully secure, any fully secure cloud IT environment? I think that's something that I think quite a few enterprises may not have to think as actively about before the pandemic. And it's really clear, I think, if we look now going forward, that is crucial. If you stand up a testing station for testing against COVID-19, and you want access to patient's record in a safe manner, then you need to have not only the connectivity, but to Paul's point, also have the cloud and applications securely managed into that connection point. And that's what I call wireless agility, which I think both enterprises and now we also see consumers will expect, I think, going forward.
So do you think that we'll come to this pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic definition of connectivity or expectation of connectivity?
I think we have already accelerated some digital transformations that were already ongoing. I mean, I mentioned just to make micro examples with team adoption right within Ericsson, but I think this goes across. It goes across my parents learning to run the online, buy the groceries online, because now you're forced to do that. And I think it shows a shift. I think as important as technology, the shift in behavior, because now there was a burning platform. And I think that acceleration will not slow down. So I think trends that are already ongoing and transformation ongoing pre-pandemic, they will probably have accelerated and become even stronger pandemic. And I think it's digital transformation that we expected to happen anyways, just that I think may happen a bit faster now.
Yeah, and Paul, do you see that same pre-pandemic versus a post-pandemic definition or expectation of connectivity?
It's been a real accelerator. I think on the one hand, it's shown, CIOs have become heroes overnight. Before they were cost centers, now they are actually business enablers. How long will that last? We will see. But infrastructure has been extremely important, and we've actually deployed more fiber connections to more sites in 2020 than we did in 2019, despite all of the constraints we had relative to the security intervention. So I think fiber now is a must. It's people want the 5G, the wireless, and they want the fiber to complement what's going on. I think what we have seen is that those customers who had already embarked upon a network transformation and a cloud transformation to a software-defined solution based upon products of our own or others were in a much better position to deal with the problems and also then sustain it over time in a secure manner. I think probably a point we haven't covered so far is security. Security for me, a lot of people may have established quick and somewhat dirty solutions, but we know that will lead to increasing competency because we've seen a rise in the security ransomware attacks of all natures. So I think doing that quickly and in a secure manner and in a flexible environment, that is challenging. You need all three at the same time.
Has there been a rise in interest or deployment for SD-WAN?
Actually, if I look at the customer basis, you probably see two things which have not really been put on the back burner because, of course, with the constraints, but also the financial impact, anything to do with customer experience, so be it contact center or transformation, and anything to do with software-defined SD-WAN transformation, they are being given absolute priority by most of the CIOs as elements which are necessary in addition to, of course, all of the transformation on the user side. I've also heard some of the CIOs say, why did we have all of these user adoption programs which took 12 to 18 months when people were able to master the tools, as Oza said, with themselves on their own in their home within 2 weeks? Do we really need this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And also, from your perspective, how has that security question been answered?
I think the two parts. One is just the inherent enhanced security capabilities of the 5G architecture and how that standard is built. I think paves the way for more secure connectivity. And I think, just as Paul mentioned, I think a lot of people have not even reflected upon the implications of, connecting on a Wi-Fi without security, and actually what all the applications you use can actually be exposed to a third party and maybe a malicious one. So I think there is. I think security together with, you can say, secure, reliable without trading off on the flexibility. Those characteristics that were already there with 5G just showed, you could say, even stronger product market fit, if I would put it that way. With that said, we also have security solutions. And, if I also look at Cradlepoint, which is one of the companies we acquired also, interestingly, during the pandemic, I led that acquisition completely remotely. It was another exciting, interesting experience doing remotely. But if you look at their product, completely cloud-based manager, which has a mobile SD-WAN solution, and they've had tremendous demand for their products, especially in the public safety. I mean, if you, just as Paul mentioned, both in when it comes to national health, but also other authorities, as well as many companies. And it's very much driven by the resiliency and the security. And we see that is rising. But it's one layer is the connectivity. But the other layer is as important is also the security of application and having a secure IT environment. And secure connectivity is one part of that. And I think this is where, for instance, Orange has a very interesting business portfolio, which they are helping solving that pain point for the enterprise customers.
Yes, I think this, the security solution has to be embedded into your products, has to be in the solution the customer has. We range from customers who are on the SOHO market to the medium size, to government institute, to worldwide companies and institutions, things like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs all had to set up contact centers to advise all of their inhabitants where they should go, who should they contact. So all of these elements were extremely important. And I think we start to see the value of all of these network solutions and the connectivity that this brings, because the amount of information now, the second phase was using the information. How do you use all of the information we collect on those mobile networks to correlate that with pandemic information, to even come to the point we can tell stores, there's no point in you actually opening up at this point in time because there's nobody in there who's willing to go to the store. So there's no point in opening up the store. But if you open the store up at this time, we'll make sure that people are aware. So there's a whole even different way of communicating using this information, of course, respecting the privacy rules and anonymously. But a lot of that information is now being used in an effective manner. So it's been accelerated of the infrastructure, but also of the data. And we have a very large subsidiary, Orange Cyber Defense, who are specialized in this particular environment, of course, threat detection and threat remediation. We have been very much, unfortunately, involved in helping customers who have been attacked, who have been subject to ransomware, and have many companies who've lots seen to them. What do you do, and how do you continue to move forward? So, as the threat has increased on the pandemic side, the security threat has really significantly increased from everyone, and we see them targeting all segments of customers, small, medium size, town halls. Anyone is a game for them.
Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes one problem leads to the next, one problem multiplied by another. I'd like to ask both of you, though, about this extending this borderless enterprise concept with 5G. And of course, we're still early days with 5G in terms of rollouts, but how do you see this coming into play for this borderless enterprise?
Thank you. So I think to me, it's two aspects of the borderless enterprise. One is if we look at how the world has looked like so far, it's been a world where we have operators have been more consumer centric traditionally than enterprise centric. Enterprise has typically been the second one. We now see perhaps 10% of the operators globally are actually going seriously after the enterprise space, and Paul and Orange Business Services is one of those. But it's clear when we looked at it, we actually built networks for countries. And if you look at enterprises may not be, they typically, they're not bound to just one geography. And they sell products in different geographies. And I think one thing we haven't solved really today is if you want to just take a simple IoT application, you may need different product SKUs just to be able to connect your products in different parts of the world. So there, I think we have an opportunity, and there are forces now where we're trying to simplify that, where we can actually get more standardization. That's one aspect to me of borderless coverage, and where we can simplify everything from the commercial process to actually the service experience. So you can have network parity and actually the same experience, and hopefully with less stocks and different types of SKUs of your product to launch a service that's using connectivity that works in different countries. But I think there's another thing which I think about about borderless, and that is that you should be able to get that quality service anywhere, if you're indoor, outdoor, and that we can guarantee when with the capacity, the latency, the security level, fit for purpose when you need it. And this is where you have the power of network slices. The architecture, the standard is built for that. It's still to be commercialized in the industry. in the sense that it's, practically and commercially available to enterprises, but also consumers. And that, I think, is a big, big opportunity for us. And I'm looking forward to see how we're going to develop and launch that in the market together with the service provider partners in the coming years.
Okay. And Paul, do you see this same concept of network splicing as a big opportunity for Orange Business?
I think it is an opportunity for us because we're seeing very different business models. If we can imagine tomorrow that in an industrial environment, you won't need the same decked environment in each site with a standalone equipment. You will have one single element which will pilot this, but you have got to guarantee the communication in a seamless manner with the highest level of quality between this. Or if we have a police force which requires guaranteed quality of service at all times, it will require these different things. Of course, the costs will be different. I think also associated with this, we have the edge. The edge is really evolving a lot, and this is the edge can be in the car, it can be an industrial plant, it can be a smart city, it can be any of these verticals where we want to generate it. So we're working with industrial partners who equip all of these elements. We have three focuses. One is on automotive, the other one's on industrial, and then we have smart cities. And sometimes it'll be, I would say, a local intelligent edge, which will then interconnect with the wider communication across the scale. But let's also remind ourselves that some of the devices we're equipping or implementing in devices here are things like cars. You will only install a wireless connection in a car when it's being manufactured, and it can be shipped anywhere in the world, and it can have different uses, and there'll be applications which the manufacturers will want to add on top of this, but it has to be a global coherent solution which can last for 10 to 15 years with a service platform which can mediate all of these applications and elements. And this is where the power of a global partnership such as ours with Ericsson enables us to do this. And I think we're seeing a lot of traction in the market for these global solutions at the same time as we're seeing the edge solutions happen on the different sites. So I think it's quite exciting, and there'll be smaller, easier to develop perhaps local business models, but I think the best thing I would say is I think it was a statistic I saw in 2025, there'll be more data generated by business endpoints than by the consumer industry.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I agree with you, Paul. I think it's also interesting if I look at the users that are on our joint global platform in IoT. It's really where we win a lot of business together is really on the global automotive. They have high demands, they want high quality, and they want the same quality service, and they want simplicity in the global management and operations. So you can say one part is really performance and consistent service experience, and we support and deliver that together with a one global core and bring the best of a global core and a local radio access delivery. And I think that's kind of where we bring the best of two worlds. I'm really excited where we're going to take that also with the 5G generation, which we're working on launching together. But I think it's proven the emphasis of both the performance, but also that simplicity that Paul was talking about. One global deal, one global partner. Now Orange is the global partner of several leading OEMs thanks to that partnership. I think the other part, which we have not seen today yet, and I'm really looking forward to, is besides the meeting the different requirements of different industries and settings that Paul described, my vision is that we can bring this capability, that specific slice of a certain SLA level on demand. So what if we could start activate that on demand? Now, I understand this requires 5G rollout to be a bit more mature, but I think Paul and I jointly have an opportunity to say, how do we use that technology, package that so it can actually be available on demand once we have the rollout to support that. And that I think is super exciting because they're bringing that user experience together with the network capabilities. And that's true flexibility.
Working that back into our theme of work from anywhere, work from home, when we have those kind of capabilities, do you think our experience, well, hopefully we're done with pandemics by then, but do you think our experience of work from home will be significantly better or different?
I think it can be a lot better given the we had some network issues. Now I'm on 4G and not on 5G. could be the reason. It would be good with some extra bandwidth and a bit, but that's one base. I think the one dimension that I think super relevant for working from home is the security level that Paul was talking about. I think that will be tremendously important. And you see that already now for mid and small size law firm, healthcare companies. It doesn't have to be super advanced for actually having a very high security need. And then you need to think that through when you have people working with sensitive information at home. So I think that's one. I don't know about you, Paul, if you have additional reflections on that one.
I think we can always do better. Now, what we're seeing is a number of points. One is an absolute acceleration of fiber. So people will want fiber as same way they'll want electricity, and the same way they'll want 5G or 4G at the moment. They need both. They need both arms to work. And I think the way we put a capability to have the bandwidth on demand, because we're going to have basically different communities working from home. All of them need high bandwidth. Professional, teenagers, younger, they all need bandwidth. We need prioritization. So is prioritization locally? The idea is it separate subscriptions for the professional and the personal life? I don't think it's the latter, to be honest myself. I think it's just too much money involved in doing that. Can it be a combination of fiber with 5G? Probably. I think we'll come down to a question of performance. Absolute performance of the network, of who you're using. It's, of course, service, but it's down to the actual performance of the infrastructure and the products that people are using. And when they're satisfied with them, yes, they want more demand. They want more on demand. So the biggest request is, can I increase my capacity on my own, faster and simpler? In some cases, downgrade.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, I think we all have that desire for more bandwidth, and more bandwidth. So I'd like to thank both of our guests here today for your participation in the MEF's Infinite Ed series, and especially for your hard work in keeping everyone connected during the pandemic. So thank you, Paul. Thank you, Elsa.
Thank you.
Thank you.